Hey, seventh graders. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. So, we are ready to end our Martian tale. Let's go in and see what happens. So, go into our Google Classroom and click on Monday, December 14th. Dark they were and golden-eyed. When you open it up, it will look like this. Before we start reading, though, let's see what our questions are. First question. Based on this story, should we make a home in space? Why or why not? How much of our belief about space is fictionally based? So, what we think about space now, as in Miss Kagan's wearing a crazy mask in space, how much of what we think about in space is based on false things? And explain your thinking there. So, the last thing we're going to do is the theme. We've done this before. This is a review. So, you're going to answer these 3 questions and then do the theme. The first question: what is the conflict and how is it resolved? What do the characters learn from events and how do they change? And what is the big idea or topic? Remember, those are only 1 to 2 words. So, using your answers on these 3 things, what do you think the theme is? Remember, the theme is the overall message. Okay. So, go back up to the top here of your story, and we have to figure out what happens to the family. So, go up to the top. While you're reading, you should annotate if you find any of the answers to those questions. Also, if you find any examples of figurative language or underline words you don't know. Okay, don't forget our questions. Have this open. Okay, you should be at the top here. Last we left the family, they were walking up to a house, a villa, and they had just gone swimming, and the dad is trying to build a rocket to escape Mars. But the mom and all of the kids are starting to change, and they don't seem to want to go. All right, so we'll have to see what happens. Okay, so everybody ready? You should be following along and annotating and preparing to answer those questions. Press play.
It came to a small deserted Martian villa with a good view of the valley. It was on top of a hill. Blue marble halls, large murals, a swimming pool. It was refreshing in this hot summertime. The Martians hadn't believed in large cities. "How nice," said Mrs. Bittering, "if we could move up here to this villa for the summer." "Come on," he said. "We're going back to town. There's work to be done on the rocket." But as he worked that night, the thought of the cool blue marble villa entered his mind. As the hours passed, the rocket seemed less important. In the flow of days and weeks, the rocket receded and dwindled. The old fever was gone. It frightened him to think he had let it slip this way, but somehow the heat, the air, the working conditions. He heard the men murmuring on the porch of his metal shop. "Everyone's going, you heard? All going, that's right." Bittering came out. "Going where?" He saw a couple of trucks loaded with children and furniture. drive down the dusty street. Up to the villas, said the man. Yeah, Harry, I'm going. So is Sam. Aren't you, Sam? That's right, Harry. What about you? I've got work to do here. Work? You can finish that rocket in the autumn when it's cooler. He took a breath. I got the frame all set up. In the autumn is better. Their voices were lazy in the heat. Gotta work, he said. Autumn, they reasoned. And they sounded so sensible, so right. Autumn would be best, he thought. Plenty of time then. No, cried part of himself, deep down, put away, locked tight, suffocating. No, no. In the autumn, he said. Come on, Harry, they all said. Yes, he said, feeling his flesh melt in the hot, liquid air. Yes, in the autumn. I'll begin work again then. I got a villa near the Tara Canal, said someone. You mean the old Roosevelt Canal, don't you? Tara, the old Martian name. But on the map, forget the map, it's Tara now. Now I found a place in the Pelon Mountains. You mean the Rockefeller Range, said Bittering. I mean the Pelon Mountains, said Sam. Yes, said Bittering, buried in the hot swarming air. The Pelon Mountains. Everyone worked at loading the truck in the hot, still afternoon of the next day. Laura, Dan, and David carried packages, or, as they preferred to be known, Teal, Lenil, and Ware carried packages. The furniture was abandoned in the little white cottage. It looked just fine in Boston, said the mother, and here in the cottage. But up at the villa, no. We'll get it when we come back in the autumn. Bittering himself was quiet. I've some ideas on furniture for the villa, he said after a time. Big, lazy furniture. What about your encyclopedia? You're taking it along, surely. Mr. Bittering glanced away. I'll come and get it next week. They turned to their daughter. What about your New York dresses? The bewildered girl stared. Why, I don't want them anymore. They shut off the gas, the water. They locked the doors and walked away. Father peered into the truck. Gosh, we're not taking much, he said. Considering all we brought to Mars, this is only a handful. He started the truck. Looking at the small white cottage for a long moment, he was filled with a desire to rush to it, touch it, say goodbye to it, for he felt as if he were going away on a long journey, leaving something to which he could never quite return, never understand again. Just then, Sam and his family drove by in another truck. Hi, Bittering, here we go. The truck swung down the ancient highway out of town. There were 60 others traveling in the same direction. The town filled with a silent, heavy dust from their passage. The canal waters lay blue in the sun, and a quiet wind moved in the strange trees. Goodbye, town, said Mr. Bittering. Goodbye, goodbye, said the family, waving to it. They did not look back again. Summer burned the canals dry. Summer moved like flame upon the meadows. In the empty earth settlement, the painted houses flaked and peeled. Rubber tires upon which children had swung in backyards hung suspended like stopped clock pendulums in the blazing air. At the metal shop, the rocket frame began to rust. In the quiet autumn, Mr. Bittering stood, very dark now, very golden-eyed, upon the slope above his villa, looking at the valley. It's time to go back, said Cora. Yes, but we're not going, he said quietly. There's nothing there anymore. Your books, she said. Your fine clothes. Your Ila's. And your fine Ior Are, she said. The town's empty. No one's going back, he said. There's no reason to. None at all. The daughter wove tapestries, and the sons played songs on ancient flutes and pipes, their laughter echoing in the marble villa. Mr. Bittering gazed at the earth settlement far away in the low valley. Such odd, such ridiculous houses the earth people built. They didn't know any better, his wife mused. Such ugly people. I'm glad they've gone. They both looked at each other, startled by all they had just finished saying. They laughed. Where did they go, he wondered. He glanced at his wife. She was golden and slender as his daughter. She looked at him, and he seemed almost as young as their eldest son. I don't know, she said. We'll go back to town, maybe next year or the year after, or the year after that, he said calmly. Now I'm warm. How about taking a swim? They turned their backs to the valley. Arm in arm, they walked silently down a path of clear running spring water. 5 years later, a rocket fell out of the sky. It lay steaming in the valley. Men leaped out of it, shouting, "We won the war on Earth! We're here to rescue you! Hey!" But the American-built town of cottages, peach trees, and theaters was silent. They found a flimsy rocket frame rusting in an empty shop. The rocket men searched the hills. The captain established headquarters in an abandoned bar. His lieutenant came back to report. "The town's empty, but we found native life in the hills, sir. Dark people, yellow eyes, Martians, very friendly. We talked a bit, not much. They learn English fast. I'm sure our relations will be most friendly with them, sir." "Dark, eh?" mused the captain. "How many?" 600-800, I'd say, living in those marble ruins in the hills, sir. Tall, healthy, beautiful women. Did they tell you what became of the men and women who built this Earth settlement, Lieutenant? They hadn't the foggiest notion of what happened to this town or its people. Strange. You think those Martians killed them? They look surprisingly peaceful. Chances are a plague did this town in, sir. Perhaps. I suppose this is one of those mysteries we'll never solve. One of those mysteries you read about. The captain looked at the room. The dusty windows, the blue mountains rising beyond, the canals moving in the light, and he heard the soft wind in the air. He shivered. Then, recovering, he tapped a large, fresh map he had thumbtacked to the top of an empty table. "Lots to be done, Lieutenant." His voice droned on and quietly on as the sun sank behind the blue hills. New settlements, mining sites, minerals to be looked for, bacteriological specimens taken, the work, all the work, and the old records were lost. We'll have a job of remapping to do, renaming the mountains and rivers and such. Calls for a little imagination. What do you think of naming those mountains the Lincoln Mountains, this canal the Washington Canal, those hills? We can name those hills for you, Lieutenant. Diplomacy. And you, for a favor, might name a town for me. Polishing the apple. And why not make this the Einstein Valley, and farther over? Are you listening, Lieutenant? The lieutenant snapped his gaze from the blue color and the quiet mist of the hills far beyond the town. "What? Oh, yes, sir."
Dun, dun, dun. So, what happened to the people? Oh, wait, nothing happened to the people. But they just forgot how they were Earthlings, and now they are Martians. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so your job is to answer those questions at the bottom of the page, and we will discuss them. All right, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you soon.